We've all dealt with people who take credit for our hard work. But what if you had the chance to go back and watch them implode? This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a masterclass in letting karma do the heavy lifting. Grab your coffee, because this tale of corporate intrigue, redemption, and cold-blooded justice is about to change how you look at loyalty forever. Blood pooling on a cold linoleum floor was my last memory. Now, I'm standing in a ball gown holding a glass of Dom Perignon, staring at the exact man who destroyed my life and the best friend who let him do it. This time, I'm not playing the savior. Gasping for air, my lungs expanding with a sharp, burning intake of oxygen, I nearly dropped the crystal champagne flute in my trembling hand. A split second ago, I was dying in a sterile, freezing prison infirmary, listening to the monotonous beep of a failing heart monitor. My reputation had been shredded, my finances obliterated, and my freedom stolen. All because I took the fall for a massive corporate fraud I didn't commit, desperate to save the woman standing right in front of me. "Earth to Chloe," a voice chimed, laced with an irritating familiar giggle. "Are you even listening to me? You're staring into space like a freak, blinking away the phantom chill of death." My vision focused. The harsh fluorescent lights of the penitentiary vanished, replaced by the warm, golden chandeliers of the St. Regis Ballroom in Manhattan. The air smelled of expensive old wood and fresh orchids, not bleach and despair. Riley. She stood there in a stunning emerald green, Oscar de la Renta gown, the exact gown I had paid for, because she'd claimed she couldn't afford to attend this networking gala. Her blonde hair fell in perfect cascading waves, and her eyes sparkled with an insatiable, greedy ambition I used to mistake for passion. In my previous life, she was my business partner, my college roommate, my sister in everything but blood. We had built a boutique public relations firm, Zenith Media, from the ground up, and she was the one who testified under oath that I was the mastermind behind the embezzlement, crying beautiful, rehearsed tears on the witness stand, while her new fiancé held her hand in the gallery. "I'm fine," I managed to say, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Steady, cold. Just a sudden wave of déjà vu. "Well, snap out of it," Riley whispered excitedly, gripping my forearm. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into my skin. "He's walking over. Oh my God, Chloe. He's actually coming over. Do I look okay?" I didn't need to turn my head to know who she was talking about. The sudden drop in my stomach, the instinctual urge to flee, heralded only one person: Julian Sterling. Julian was a venture capitalist, with a reputation for aggressively scaling small businesses and then gutting them for parts. He was devastatingly handsome, possessing sharp aristocratic features, piercing blue eyes, and a predatory smile that disarmed even the most cynical veteran businessman. In my past life, Riley had fallen for him instantly at this very gala. When he offered to invest $1 million into Zenith Media, I had fought tooth and nail against it. I saw the red flags in his term sheets. I warned Riley. He was trying to leverage our assets. My resistance caused the first major rift between us. Riley accused me of being jealous, of trying to hold her back. Ultimately, out of a misguided sense of loyalty and a desperate desire to keep my best friend, I caved. I signed the documents. That single signature was my death warrant. "Good evening, ladies," a smooth baritone voice purred. I turned. There he was, Julian Sterling, wearing a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, holding a highball glass of scotch. He looked exactly as he had the day he sat in the courtroom and watched the judge sentence me to 8 years in federal lockup. "Julian," Riley breathed, her voice dropping an octave into a sultry, practiced purr. "It's such a pleasure to finally meet you in person. I'm Riley, and this is my partner Chloe." He extended a hand. I stared at it for a fraction of a second. The last time I touched that hand, it was signing a non-disclosure agreement he used to trap me. I forced my lips into a polite, vacant smile, and briefly shook his hand. His grip was firm, dominating. "Zenith Media," Julian said, his eyes raking over Riley with blatant, calculating interest. "I've been reading about your recent campaign for the Harrison Tech launch. Impressive numbers. You girls are playing in the big leagues now." "We try," Riley laughed, completely oblivious to the fact that she was conversing with a wolf. Actually, we're looking to expand. We have the talent, but we lack the capital to open our Los Angeles branch. In my previous life, this was the exact moment I intervened. I had politely interrupted, steering the conversation away from our private financial needs, trying to protect our company's vulnerability. That intervention had led to a screaming match in the hotel lobby later that night, with Riley calling me a paranoid control freak. Not this time. Riley is the true visionary behind our expansion, I said, my voice smooth as glass. I took a deliberate step back, physically distancing myself from her. She has an incredible mind for aggressive growth. In fact, I mostly just handle the back-end administration. Riley is the face of Zenith. Riley shot me a surprised, triumphant look. She had always resented my role as the primary strategist. Hearing me publicly diminish my own value to elevate hers was exactly what her colossal ego craved. Julian's eyes shifted to me, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his features before he turned his full predatory attention back to Riley. Is that right? A visionary? I like that. I prefer dealing with founders who aren't afraid to take massive risks. I'm terrified of playing it safe, Riley purred, stepping closer to him, completely blocking me from his view. I took a slow sip of my champagne, letting the crisp, cold liquid ground me in reality. I wasn't dead. I was 26 again. And I held the ultimate trump card. Foresight. If Riley wanted to dive into a shark tank covered in blood, I wasn't going to pull her out. I was going to hand her a heavier set of weights. If you two will excuse me, I interrupted softly. I need to make a quick phone call. Riley, text me when you're ready to leave. Take your time, Chloe. Riley dismissed me with a careless wave of her hand, already completely captivated by Julian's intense stare. Walking away from them, a strange, dark euphoria washed over me. I navigated through the sea of wealthy socialites, slipped out onto the hotel terrace, and pulled out my phone. I didn't call a cab. I called my personal attorney, a bulldog of a lawyer named Spencer Hayes, whom I had only met during my criminal trial in my past life. Back then he had been court-appointed and exhausted, but he had told me I was a fool for the way my corporate operating agreement was structured. Spencer Hayes? A gruff voice answered on the third ring. Mr. Hayes, my name is Chloe. You don't know me yet, but I need to retain your services immediately to draft a corporate restructuring agreement and an ironclad indemnification clause, I said, watching the traffic of Fifth Avenue below. I need to legally sever my financial liability from my business partner before Monday morning. Monday morning arrived with the chaotic energy typical of a rising PR firm. Phones were ringing, assistants were sprinting with coffee orders, and the whiteboard in the conference room was covered in campaign strategies. I sat in my glass-walled office, reviewing the documents Spencer had messaged over during the weekend. The door flew open. Riley practically danced into the room, holding a massive bouquet of white hydrangeas. Look what just arrived, she squealed, dropping the flowers onto my desk. A sleek black card rested in the center. I didn't need to read it to know it was from Julian. Chloe, he wants to invest $2 million. Double what we initially projected for the LA expansion. I feigned shock, widening my eyes. Riley, that's incredible. How did you manage that? We had drinks after the gala. We just clicked. You know, he sees my vision, she said, pacing the room, high on her own adrenaline. He's sending his legal team over on Wednesday to draft the term sheets. We are going to be rich, Chloe. Rich and untouchable. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, intertwining my fingers. There's a catch, though, isn't there? Investors like Sterling don't just hand over $2 million without wanting significant control. Riley paused, a defensive shadow crossing her face. Well, yes. He wants a seat on the board and a 51% voting majority on financial decisions during the first fiscal year, but he promised it's just a formality to appease his risk assessment team. In my past life, I had screamed. I had thrown a textbook at the wall. I had told her giving up 51% was corporate suicide. Today, I smiled gently. You know what, Riley? You're right. He sees your vision. Her defensiveness vanished, replaced by sheer shock. Wait, really? You're not going to fight me on this? You always shoot down my aggressive strategies. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the gala, I replied, standing up and walking around the desk. I placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. You are the face of Zenith. You have the charisma, the drive. I'm just holding you back with my caution. If Julian is investing in you, then you should be the one holding the reins. I walked back to my desk and pulled out the legal folder Spencer had prepared. I slid it across the smooth mahogany surface. What's this? Riley asked, frowning at the thick stack of paper. It's a corporate restructuring agreement, I said casually. If Julian wants majority voting rights, he's going to want to deal with a single, decisive CEO. Right now, we are equal partners. It makes things messy. I'm stepping down as co-CEO. I will transfer 15% of my equity to you, making you the undisputed majority shareholder among the founders. You take the title of sole CEO. I'll step back into a purely creative role as creative director. My name comes off the financial signatory accounts. You will have total freedom to run this company with Julian. Riley stared at me, her mouth slightly parted. For a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of suspicion. But Riley's Achilles heel had always been her vanity. The idea of being the sole CEO, the undisputed boss, the one calling the shots and receiving all the glory, was too intoxicating for her to question my motives. Chloe, I don't know what to say, she whispered, her eyes shining as she picked up the pen. I promise I won't let you down. We're going to the top. I know you will, Riley, I murmured, watching her sign away her safety net. Just sign at the bottom of page 4 and initial the indemnification clause on page 7. It just says that, as CEO, you assume legal responsibility for the company's financial filings. She barely skimmed the words before scribbling her signature. Over the next 6 months, the trap I allowed them to set for themselves snapped shut with agonizing precision. Julian's $2 million investment arrived, and the atmosphere at Zenith Media changed overnight. Riley moved out of her modest apartment and signed a lease on a penthouse in Tribeca. Paying for it through a corporate housing allowance Julian had graciously approved. The office was remodeled with imported Italian marble. We started throwing extravagant, 6-figure launch parties for clients who were barely paying us 5 figures. The math didn't add up, and I knew exactly why. Julian was using Zenith as a shell. He was funneling money from his other failing ventures through our accounts, disguising them as exorbitant vendor fees and consulting retainers. Riley, blinded by the designer clothes, the VIP access, and Julian's manipulative romance, signed every invoice he put in front of her. She thought she was playing high-stakes finance. In reality, she was creating a paper trail of massive federal wire fraud with her name stamped on every single page. I stayed quietly in the background, churning out brilliant PR campaigns to keep our actual client base happy, documenting everything. I kept encrypted backups of the real vendor costs versus the inflated invoices Riley was signing. The fracture finally happened in early November. I was working late, reviewing a press release when my office door opened. Riley walked in, looking radically different from the glamorous CEO she portrayed. Her skin was pale. Her eyes had dark circles underneath, and her hands were trembling. The illusion was breaking. Chloe, are you busy? She asked, her voice tight, lacking its usual arrogant lilt. Just finishing up the Collins account, I said, closing my laptop. What's wrong? You look exhausted. She sat heavily in the chair opposite me, pulling her cashmere coat tightly around herself. It's the auditors. Julian's secondary investment firm is doing a routine audit of our books for the 3rd quarter. Routine audits are standard, Riley. You're the CEO. You shouldn't worry about standard protocol, I said, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. I know, but... She swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. There are some discrepancies. Julian had me fast-track some vendor payments to a media buyer in offshore accounts. Millions, Chloe, and the invoices. They look weird. The tax IDs don't match up. In my past life, this was when I jumped in. This was when I stayed up for 3 days straight, finding the errors and ultimately forging my own signature to retroactively approve the transactions as creative misallocations to shield her from the IRS. That sounds like a serious accounting issue, I said, leaning back. Have you spoken to our CPA? I can't, she whispered, a tear spilling over her lashes. Julian said, if the CPA sees this, it could trigger an SEC investigation. He said, I need to fix it internally. Fix it how? I asked. Riley leaned forward, desperation radiating from her. Chloe, you're a genius with paperwork. You know the system better than anyone. I need you to log into the back end and alter the creative budgets. If you backdate a few massive campaign expenses under your department, it will balance the ledger. Just sign off on these 4 invoices. She slid a manila folder across my desk. Inside were the forged documents, the exact same documents that had sent me to prison. I looked at the folder, then up at the woman who had happily let me rot in a cell so she could marry the man orchestrating this crime. My heart beat with a steady, icy rhythm. I subtly tapped the screen of my Apple Watch, ensuring the voice memo app I had activated when she walked in was still recording. Riley, I said softly, locking eyes with her. Are you asking me to commit federal fraud to cover up money you and Julian misappropriated? Riley recoiled as if I had struck her across the face. The manicured hands that had eagerly signed away my safety months ago now flew to her mouth in feigned horror. Fraud? Chloe, don't use that word. It's an administrative error, a simple misallocation of funds. You are making it sound like a criminal conspiracy. Because it is a criminal conspiracy, Riley, I replied, my tone deliberately flat and devoid of the panic she desperately wanted me to mirror. You authorized the transfer of millions of dollars to offshore entities that have zero record of providing services to this firm. Now you are asking me to forge campaign budgets to hide the deficit. That is the textbook definition of federal wire fraud. I am your best friend, she shrieked, slamming her hands on my mahogany desk, her eyes wild with a terror she could no longer suppress. I gave you a career. I gave you a place in my company. You owe me this, Chloe. If I go down, Julian pulls his funding. Zenith goes bankrupt. We both lose everything. Is that what you want? The sheer audacity of her entitlement was staggering. In my past life, this was the exact guilt trip that had broken my resolve. I had believed her manipulative lies. I had believed we were a team facing a crisis together. I had believed that if I didn't save her, I was a massive failure of a friend. I had sacrificed my own freedom, my youth, and my sanity on the altar of her ungrateful ambition. I don't owe you my freedom, I said, simply closing the manila folder and pushing it back across the desk toward her. I am the creative director. My job is to design PR campaigns, not launder Julian Sterling's dirty money. Find another way to fix your mistake. I will not sign these documents. Riley snatched the folder to her face, contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. The illusion of the sweet, ambitious best friend finally slipped away, revealing the ruthless narcissist beneath. You are just jealous, she hissed, her voice dripping with spite. You have always been jealous of me. Jealous of my title. Jealous of my success. Jealous that Julian wanted me and not your boring, cautious self. You are nothing but a glorified assistant, Chloe. I will fix this myself. And when I do, you are officially fired. She spun on her designer heels and stormed out, shattering the peaceful silence of the office as the glass door slammed shut behind her. I sat alone in my chair, the residual adrenaline slowly receding, replaced by a cold, calculating calm. I reached over, tapped my Apple Watch, and permanently saved the audio file. Riley was right about one thing. She was going to fix it herself. And she was going to use her own signature to do it, effectively sealing her own doom. The evidence dossier. The next morning, while Riley was purportedly working from home to manually adjust the ledgers and forge the necessary paperwork, I took a yellow cab to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's field office in Lower Manhattan. I didn't walk in blind. Spencer Hayes, my brilliant attorney, had already arranged a clandestine meeting with Special Agent Wyatt Montgomery, a seasoned, highly decorated investigator in the white-collar crime division. Sitting in the stark, windowless interrogation room, I slid a heavy encrypted flash drive across the cold metal table. Agent Montgomery, a sharp-eyed man with graying temples and a perfectly pressed suit, raised a skeptical eyebrow. "What exactly am I looking at, Miss Chloe?" he asked, crossing his arms over his chest. "You are looking at the systematic dismantling of a multi-million-dollar money laundering operation orchestrated by Julian Sterling, utilizing Zenith Media as a front," I stated clearly, my voice unwavering. "I have provided comprehensive, irrefutable documentation. Everything is neatly categorized for your forensic accountants." I handed him a printed index of the drive's contents, structured precisely to guarantee undeniable proof of their crimes. Agent Montgomery scanned the table meticulously, his professional demeanor shifting from mildly skeptical to intensely focused. "If this data verifies what you are claiming, Julian Sterling is looking at a minimum of 20 years in a federal penitentiary. And your CEO? She is looking at severe charges of conspiracy and corporate fraud. Why are you handing over your own company?" "Because I completely refuse to be collateral damage in their arrogant greed," I replied, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "My attorney's contact information is in the file. I will cooperate fully as a key witness." 3 agonizing weeks later, the glittering illusion finally shattered into a million jagged pieces. It was the night of Zenith's extravagant winter gala, hosted at the iconic Plaza Hotel. Riley had spared absolutely no expense, using the very last of the company's legitimate operating capital to rent the grand ballroom. She wore a bespoke, crimson gown, dripping in borrowed Cartier diamonds, proudly holding court among New York's financial elite. She looked like an untouchable queen at the absolute pinnacle of her reign. I stood quietly near a towering swan ice sculpture, nursing a simple glass of sparkling water, watching the beautiful tragedy unfold. The first shocking twist of the night came not from the federal authorities, but from Julian himself. Riley was eagerly awaiting his grand arrival, excitedly whispering to guests about an expected public proposal. Instead, Julian entered the opulent ballroom with a stunning, haughty brunette tightly clinging to his arm. Riley's radiant smile faltered instantly as she rushed over to intercept him. "Julian, who is this?" Riley demanded, her voice betraying a sudden, desperate edge. Julian looked at her with cold, terrifying indifference. "Riley, this is Olivia Carmichael, my fiancée. Her father owns the Carmichael banking conglomerate in London." The color rapidly drained from Riley's face, leaving her looking sickly and pale. "Your fiancé? But you said we were building a life together. You said Zenith was our empire." "Zenith was a temporary vehicle, Riley," Julian said softly, his cruel voice cutting through the ambient melodies of the string quartet. "A very useful, very disposable financial vehicle. You served your administrative purpose beautifully. But let's not confuse brief business transactions with reality." Before Riley could even attempt to process the colossal magnitude of his romantic and professional betrayal, the heavy, ornate oak doors of the ballroom violently swung open. The music abruptly stopped. A dozen federal agents in dark, tactical windbreakers, emblazoned with the bright yellow letters FBI, flooded the room. The glamorous, buzzing chatter of the wealthy socialites instantly morphed into a chaotic chorus of panicked gasps and screams. Agent Wyatt Montgomery confidently stepped forward into the center of the room, holding up a federal warrant. His booming voice echoed powerfully over the terrified, murmuring crowd. "Riley, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, massive corporate embezzlement, and international money laundering. Julian Sterling, you are under arrest for federal racketeering and orchestrating complex corporate fraud." Utter pandemonium erupted. Julian, the ever-composed, arrogant predator, finally lost his cool. He viciously shoved Olivia aside and desperately lunged toward the service exit, only to be violently tackled to the hard marble floor by 3 muscular agents. His expensive Tom Ford tuxedo tore audibly at the shoulder as they forcefully wrenched his hands behind his back. The sharp, metallic click of handcuffs echoed like a gunshot through the silent room. Riley was completely paralyzed with shock. Two agents swiftly approached her, gripping her bare arms tightly. She looked around wildly, her tear-filled eyes darting frantically through the crowd until they finally locked onto mine. "Chloe! Chloe! Tell them!" she screamed hysterically, violently thrashing against the agent's firm grip. The delicate Cartier necklace snapped around her neck, scattering priceless diamonds across the floor like frozen tears. "Tell them I didn't do it. Tell them I'm innocent. You have to help me." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I simply raised my crystal glass of sparkling water in a silent, final toast, peacefully watching as the woman who had happily sent me to prison in another life was aggressively dragged out in tight handcuffs, screaming my name until her voice gave out. The courtroom confrontation. The subsequent trial was an absolute media circus. Every major news outlet meticulously covered the spectacular, embarrassing downfall of the legendary venture capitalist and his naive, greedy puppet CEO. I sat comfortably in the courtroom gallery, wearing a sharply tailored navy blue suit, watching the proceedings with the detached, peaceful calm of a ghost who had finally found her ultimate redemption. Judge Penelope Kensington, a notoriously stern woman with absolutely zero tolerance for white-collar crime, presided over the lengthy case. When the prosecution confidently played the crisp audio recording of Riley aggressively demanding I commit forgery, a collective, audible gasp rippled through the packed courtroom. During a brief afternoon recess, I found myself walking slowly down the polished, echoing hallway outside the main court. The heavy wooden door to the holding area slowly opened, and two armed bailiffs led Riley out. She was completely unrecognizable. The glamorous, arrogant CEO was entirely gone, replaced by a hollow, trembling, defeated shell, drowning in an oversized, bright orange jumpsuit. Her signature blonde hair was a greasy, matted mess. Her glowing skin was sallow and pale. When she saw me standing there, she violently broke away from the bailiffs, lunging forward until the heavy metal chains around her wrists and ankles pulled agonizingly taut. "Chloe, please," she sobbed hysterically, falling heavily to her knees on the cold tile floor. The harsh sound of her chains rattling was a grim, fitting symphony of her own making. "Please, I am begging you on my hands and knees. Talk to the judge. Tell her Julian brainwashed and manipulated me. Tell her I didn't understand the complex documents I was signing. You have to save me, Chloe. We were sisters." I stopped, looking down at the pathetic, broken creature, weeping uncontrollably at my feet. In my previous life, I had been the one trapped in those exact chains. I had been the one crying desperately in a freezing cell, while she happily drank expensive champagne and eagerly planned her luxurious wedding. "You understood exactly what you were doing, Riley," I said, my voice echoing coldly and clearly in the empty, silent hallway. "You desperately wanted the absolute power. You demanded the glory, and you greedily wanted the stolen money. You just didn't want the consequences. He ruined us," she wailed, her face contorted in pure, miserable agony. "He ruined everything we built." "No, Riley," I corrected her firmly, leaning down slightly, so my final words would burn deeply into her memory forever. "He ruined you. I simply stepped out of the way and let you voluntarily destroy yourself. I didn't plot your downfall. I just finally stopped being your convenient human shield. Enjoy your new reality." I turned my back on her and walked away without a second glance. The sound of her desperate, agonizing wails slowly faded behind me, entirely drowned out by the steady, victorious click of my heels against the floor. I stepped out of the heavy courthouse doors and directly into the bright, blinding sunlight of Manhattan. My new company was legally protected. My professional reputation was absolutely spotless, and my future was finally truly my own. If you felt the sharp sting of Riley's betrayal and the sweet, absolute satisfaction of Chloe's ultimate calculated revenge, you are certainly not alone. True justice isn't always about getting your hands dirty. Sometimes, it's about stepping back and letting toxic people drown in the heavy consequences of their own selfish choices. Hit that like button if you agree. Share this dramatic story with your friends who love a good plot twist, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling redemption stories.